Dave was born in Rochester, New York, and grew up around New York City. After high school, he went into the Army for a while. He then went to Yale Architecture School, then back into the Army again. Then he came to Indianapolis as an architect, had his own office for a while, and then went with the firm of James Associates. Since 1958, he's been an associate in the firm of James Associates. For those of you who were on the trip to southern Indiana last year, he is the principal architect, our job captain for the new library at the University of Indiana, with the interesting departure in wall treatment panels of limestone. I asked him to come here tonight to talk about the plans for James Associates' office in Indianapolis, because I thought this would be a good way to acquaint the most of you with the things that an architect does and the way he organizes his office, in addition to the solution that an Indiana firm has had for its own office. So without any further ado, I'll turn you over to Mr. David Meeker.
Lest you think that in times of distress I retreat to the Army as a way of earning an income, my 3 appearances for the federal government were all involuntary. It just seems that when they're in trouble, they require my assistance. For what reason, I really don't know. I'd like to break this discussion into 2 particular areas. One is the organization for practice of architecture by one particular firm, and then another is all of the problems that organization can get into when it tries to be its own client. I'll brief you a little bit about our particular firm. In the state of Indiana, we are considered to be a large firm. We have approximately 70 people. We have our own structural engineering staff, our own mechanical and electrical engineering, as well as some planning people, some people in historic preservation. We are a large firm even on a national basis. According to the Engineering News Record's last survey, out of some 12,000 practicing firms in the United States, we're the 32nd largest. This always is a source of amazement to us to find out that in Indiana, and in Indianapolis in particular, in the first 75 firms in the United States, which do more than 3/4 of all the business which is done in architecture, 3 of the largest are located. We are a corporation. In many states, corporations are not permitted for professional organizations. This is not the case in the state of Indiana. There are many advantages to forming a corporation, not the least of which is taxes. When you form a corporation, of course, you have the problem of ownership of the shares of stock in the corporation. We are a limited holding corporation in that only participants in the organization hold shares. The majority of the shares are held by 7 people. Although we are a corporation, we practice more as a partnership because we have one too many people to qualify under the law as a corporate partnership. We practice under the law as a corporation and among ourselves as a partnership. Our partnership consists of a total of 12 people. All 12 have what we refer to as project architect responsibilities. This means that they meet the public, they work with the client, they have full legal and complete responsibility for those projects which are assigned to them. We require this many people because our project load tends to be quite large. Before I came up, I asked one of our business people to tell me what it was at the present time. We have 106 contracts, 85 of which are in the active stage, and we have a current contract volume of some $161 million. You can see that if you divide 85 active contracts by 12, it means that each one of the partners or project architects has more than one project to be concerned with. To practice in a larger firm, having multiple ownership and as an owner having multiple projects, it's necessary to develop some sort of organizational framework for the production of work. From a strictly legal sense, like any other corporation, we have the stockholders that I referred to. The stockholders in turn elect a board of directors, which is required by the corporate law of the state of Indiana. And those directors elect officers, as again required by the corporate laws of the state of Indiana, and an executive committee. In our particular firm, the title of president, treasurer, vice president, etc., has no meaning except as satisfying the laws of the state of Indiana to have such people. It means that when a contract is signed, it must be signed by the secretary of the corporation, and as such it is signed. But the secretary exercises no command responsibility over anyone who is not on his echelon in the corporation. Our real functioning vehicle is an executive committee. Their purpose is to take the policies which are decided by the board of directors and implement them, to reduce the infighting in certain areas and to cut out the rough going in others. More important, and in the practice of architecture, extremely important, they keep track of how much money comes in and how much money goes out, hopefully trying to keep these in some reasonable balance to reduce the borrowing required at the bank when they fall out of balance. The actual practice of the firm is broken up into 5 responsibilities. These are client relations. The word public relations or client relations has always been an anathema to the professional architect. And yet you rise and fall by your relations to the public. Since we are forbidden by our ethical enactments to advertise, it means that we must be very careful of the image that we project, that we must satisfy all of our clients' desires for publicity, and that we must have someone at hand to find out where the new work is. You will learn when you have been in practice for a while that very little work comes up on your front porch and beats your door down to get at you. Most of it you have to seek out. So we have people whose primary responsibility is to find out where the work is in the state, what schools are going to build, what their budgets are, whether or not we will be interviewed, etc. Another aspect of any architectural firm is to keep your face before the public in some happy form. It's quite easy to get in the papers when you have a disaster in your building. It's much harder to get in if you just do a good building. There's a good building, for some reason, is not very newsworthy, although it certainly should be. Very few buildings fail because of engineering difficulties. Most of them fail because of design difficulties. But we also have the responsibility in this area for public relations to see that when a project is going to be published in the paper, our name appears under it. This sounds like a rather simple thing, but if you are in any way familiar with the newspapers, it is quite difficult in some communities to get an architect's name put on his building because architects provide no advertising income to the paper. Therefore, why waste print? We have a great deal of difficulty trying to convince papers that we cannot give them money for advertising in return for publicity. The second phase of the work is what we call design. These divisions are for purposes of coordination and ease of maintenance of an overall program in the office. Under design, we have a group involved with architectural design, interior design, planning and urban design, and historical preservation. We have two people in the firm whose sole interest in life is the restoration of older buildings. This, we feel, is a very worthwhile project. Part of the problem in our cities has been and will be for some time the lack of interest on the part of the real estate man and the developer in preserving older buildings which do not return adequate income to meet the tax situation. In combination with the public relations part of the company, we attempt to persuade people that restoration of older buildings is not only good civic duty, but it can be sound business practice. A third portion of the company is devoted to systems analysis and research. This is really two separate sections, analysis and research. Analysis examines the use of various building components or systems to determine their suitability to the solution of a specific problem in a particular area, during a particular time of the year, meeting particular program requirements. What is the most efficient and expressive structural system for us to select? What is the cost that we should anticipate in the selection of each of these? And finally, how best can computers and other data machinery be used in analysis? We are now in the process of investing in a computer to carry on part of a business operation and part of a research operation. This may seem strange to you, but when you are given a program by an owner, his concept of the dollars to solve his program is not very often in direct relation to the size of the structure he wants. He normally has a champagne taste and a beer pocketbook. It's necessary for us very early in the project to make preliminary analysis not on the basis of drawing, but on the basis of a written program. To do this, you have to assemble a certain amount of historic data. How much per square foot under certain types of structural systems does a school cost for the electrical, for the certain mechanical system, for the structural system, for the site work, etc. And the reference to this material can get you off on the right track of being able to give the owner a budget that you can work in. One of the largest problems that all architects face in practice is attempting to bring desires on the part of the owner and on the part of the architect into line with what the owner can spend. The research portion of the work involves products, maintenance, and reliability. One of the plagues of a large office is the salesman. When you have 12 people, all with project responsibility, the salesman likes to make it a day by going from door to door and selling everyone the exact same thing. Not all of us will have a need for that product, not all of us will have an interest for it, and none of us will have the time in a 5 or 10 minute presentation to determine its real worth. Instead, we have the research people examine it, find out the delivery of the material, how it will last, whether it has any test data behind it for a new material, its life expectation, effective relations to other materials, etc. Maintenance. Maintenance is kind of an unusual thing. Most architects don't bother with it, but we do a great deal of shopping center work. And in a commercial venture where a man hopes to realize his capital within 10 years, he is concerned with how much your choice of materials will affect his investment as far as just keeping it clean and orderly. And you must justify to many clients your choice on how much it will cost him to have it. Finally, reliability. Many products are very attractive for their appearance, for their ingenuity, but they have very low reliability. An architect can get into a great deal of trouble by specifying materials that he has not adequately researched, so that in 2 or 3 years he's faced with a number of failures. Roofing and flashing, of course, are the most common. But believe me, when you are in a competitive market, when you are seeking interviews for new projects, one of the things that shoots you down is the fact that your roofs always leak because you didn't determine the reliability of the flashing before you specified it 3, 4, or 5 years ago. The fourth division of the firm is what we call production construction. Production, of course, is self-explanatory. The men who are on the board actually involved in the producing of construction drawings and presentation drawings. We have a support systems area for the coordination of the activities of acoustic consultants, food service, electrical, ventilating, air conditioning, organ, lighting fixtures, you name it, there are consultants for it. We have a structural department. We try to do as much of our structural work in-house as we possibly can. We finally have an organization which is called construction management. Every client expects and every architect should supervise his work adequately. Most of us vary on our practical experience in the construction field as far as recognizing good construction when we see it, recognizing the value of work in place. For this purpose, we have a number of construction superintendents who visit the projects. They are mostly registered architects or engineers or former construction superintendents. They have the responsibility of answering the contractor's on-site questions, checking his methods of construction, processing the requests for payment, because each month the contractor quite obviously wants his money. He is paid 90% of what he put in place that month, and there is a very fine legal point about your signing your name on a document telling the owner to pay a contractor $300,000 when in fact he's done $100,000 worth of work. You can be taken to court and sued for what it costs the owner, and your loss of reputation is severe in this case. Our fifth one is business management. This is the non-professional area, purely and simply. No one involved in this portion of the work is an architect, because architects are not trained very often to perform this work efficiently. Business management involves personnel. This is the coordination of promotions, demotions, hiring, firing, vacations, paying the wife's medical bills on the insurance the company carries, making sure that company property, which is leased property in the hands of individuals, is taken care of, etc. Finally, there's a fiscal and legal, such as meeting your payrolls, paying your taxes on time, your withholding, your old age security, answering queries from attorneys about what is the true progress of a job, answering queries from attorneys from distressed groups of taxpayers who do not want a school built in their community because they don't want to pay increased taxes. And finally, answering the appeals of bonding companies who want to check on the performance of the people they have bonded. We, as a number of other architectural firms, have become entrepreneurs. We find that to practice architecture fully and efficiently, it's necessary to involve ourselves in more areas than just the design of a building. We have a corporation which is involved in real estate. It's the corporation which owns the plans and the building which you will see. It is engaged in the location of real estate and negotiation of real estate for various clients. We have a South American architectural firm. One of our branches is in Lima, Peru. That is a separate corporation. We have a corporation in Peru also, which is a holding company, because in Peru, in order to practice architecture, you have to bring along the financing. They have very little themselves. And we have other affiliated groups, the business managers in charge of keeping that mishmash in order. When a group of 70 people and 12 principals decides that they have to have an office building, you face a problem which beats any problem that you would take on with a client. Very rarely do you have 12 so completely opinionated people who do not know how to work with an architect. After almost a year of trying to write a program with this herd, we finally appointed an owner and an architect. We made the business manager the owner because he was not an architect, feeling that he had to go out and find the mortgage money and be accountable for the cost of the building, and that he would be a good tight-fisted representative. It turned out just the opposite. He was the biggest spendthrift of the lot. And we appointed an architect. The architect fell to my lot, in some ways unhappily. We then used the approach of the architect interviewing the owner and writing a program to establish the space requirements. As with all owners, we started with a space requirement of about 9,000 square feet. By the time we got through the preliminaries, it was 15,000 square feet. We started with a budget of 200,000. By the time we got into the working drawings, it was 425,000. We went out to look for a site. We looked almost a year for a site. Some of the clients wanted to stay downtown in Indianapolis and renovate an old building right in the Mile Square. They were all very attractive, but very expensive. Some wanted to be halfway between downtown and out. This was also very attractive and very expensive. Some wanted to be south because the majority of their work was south. Others wanted to be north because the majority of them lived north. Finally, it was decided that the architect and the business manager, in quotes, owner, would select some sites and recommend them. This was done. We may have the first slide. We'll see the beginning of the process. If you'll push it forward, it'll engage as you press it. There you go. I think you've got it on reverse. Press the bottom and then press the top. Okay. This is something they don't tell you about in research and analysis. decision to buy was finally based upon moving on the north side of Indianapolis. It was decided that we would become landed gentry. We decided that about 2 acres or more, if available, would be just the ticket. We found a site at the corner of East 45th Street and State Road 37, about a half a mile north of the State Fairgrounds, which contained, at that time, some 5 acres of property, about 3/4 of an acre in a lake. Next slide, please. Next, please. This is a panoramic around the site. Next, please. Next, please. Here is State Road 37, a high-speed area, 40 miles speed limit, 50 miles travel. The site had on it a number of cottonwood trees and a number of weeping willows. It had on it an old shack. The pond was stocked with bass up to 18 inches. The banks were covered with people trying to catch them. The property was owned by an attorney who had owned it for many years, and just to the left of this shrub here had a cabin. He maintained it as a retreat. He lived just on the next block. And it took a number of months to prevail on him to sell it to us. It was sold on the condition that we would not fill in the lake, which we didn't intend to do. And we have the next slide, please. Here is an outline of the total area. 45th Street, State Road 37, 46th Street, Allisonville Road, the old State Road 37. The red line indicates the property that was first purchased. Here is the pond, part of it lying in the right-of-way of State Road 37. When you finally acquire a site, you have to develop a strategy for the use of that site. On urban sites, the strategy may have to involve the acquisition of other properties to protect yourself. And in this case, the vacating of several streets which were dedicated into the property, but because of road construction were no longer useful. So the owner and the architect developed a priority for the acquisition of property and a method of going about the business of organizing the site. 46th Street had a large filling station here and a small filling station there. These properties were obviously not available at any reasonable price. Along here were a series of residences which had been converted to commercial use. In this area were a number of residences which were not commercially converted. This particular piece of property was vacant. This was owned by the seller of the property. He wished to hold it further. This was a series of residences, a vacant lot and a residence which were in the negotiation phase to put in an office building, a series of houses here. We decided that our priority would be to vacate the 2 streets, closing the mechanical and utility easements involved. The acquisition as quickly as possible of priority A to the northeast with its little tongue sticking down into the site. If possible, tying up of the other piece of property held by the original owner on some sort of an agreement to sell. Since this sketch was made, we now hold an option to purchase. The original seller died, but his widow has given us an option upon her death. 2/3 of this property has been acquired. This piece has been acquired. This one appears to be beyond possibility, and these will be picked up if and when they become available. Next slide, please. when you get a piece of property, before you sink the money into it, you might just as well make a sketch about what can be done with it. This is necessary for two reasons. Most architectural firms don't have the money to support a large building effort all by itself. It ties up too much capital. The ideal thing is to get yourself in a landlord position where you have good rentable space which is paying your mortgage. This was our aim. Our analysis indicated that if we had about 45,000 square feet of leased space, leasing for approximately $4.50 a square foot, with suitable parking, leasing at $1 per square foot, we could overcome most of the investment in our own building and end up by having the return from the other buildings meet our mortgage payments on the whole thing. Since $5.50 was the rent for an adjoining office complex, we felt that $4.50 was a reasonable figure. The area north of us, which had been a nursery for landscape material for many years, is scheduled to go garden apartments. Here you see the two filling stations. The schematic layout was to put a multi-story rental unit in the northeast corner, set one floor high, setting on pilotis or on columns, so that we could command a long view. In this particular area, the view was quite attractive, and we felt by raising it one floor, we could collect more money for it. We felt another rental unit at this point would be worthwhile. We did not want to establish a through drive situation. We wanted a single drive and the parking for these two and another drive for parking into this one, so we would not have the problem of people avoiding the lights by using our drives. This is purely schematic. At the same time, we tried to indicate what landscape screening would be required to set the buildings off by themselves, what the relationship would be to our pond. We started off with an office of a total of 8,000 square feet. As I told you, this grew large. Next slide, please. We finally were in a position to make a site analysis. The material that you are seeing is the material that was presented to the client. When you deal with a bunch of architects, you're better off not making too many tight drawings because they feel like you're trying to sell them something. So we use sketches. The obvious considerations are these, of course. Prevailing winds are from the southwest, 7 to 9 months out of the year. This is a broader outlook of our site, which is located right in here. This area on the triangle was heavy tree cover, committed someday to be low-rise apartment units, townhouse type. North, townhouse apartments. West, Atkinson Square, which is a low-rise, spread-out, colonial-type office complex. Apartments and offices. Fall Creek Parkway, Fall Creek, property controlled by the Park Department of Indianapolis, miscellaneous residences. State Road 37, 40 miles an hour to this intersection, 50 miles an hour beyond, which means that it's 50 miles an hour everywhere. 40 miles on Allisonville Road, 40 miles an hour on 46th Street, as fast as you can go on 45th Street. In the future, when Indianapolis stops fighting, there will be an east side interstate connection. It may be many, many moons from now, but we felt we might have to consider it. It will be elevated coming across Fall Creek Boulevard, elevated to this point, coming down and hitting the ground up in this vicinity, which meant that we had to consider the possibility in the future of a building which could be seen from above. The property is approximately 4 feet below the level of State Road 37 on a swale. This road dips down here. In going around the site, there were some places where you could penetrate all of the buildings in the trees and come into some view of the building. For instance, on State Road 37 or on the bypass, you could, about this point, take in the greatest part of the lot. On 45th Street, about this point. On Allisonville Road, there was a break through the trees in the house. It's about like this. Down this dedicated street, here. And finally, coming south on 37, a view about in this fashion. So our considerations are marked on the right, or scribbled on mark. 1, building below road, roof will read. 2, high-speed travel, which dictates a relatively bold form, simple statement of architecture. You need an arresting feature to make people remember it. If you have water, you're partway home. So we felt we should bring the water up to one higher level by considering about a 30-foot jet fountain in the pond. People will remember fountains and ducks faster than almost anything. 3, future interstate. The effect of the total piece of property when seen from 30 feet in the air over part of this, and as an interstate is changing direction. Finally, the neighborhood. Residential to light commercial. Acquire the options available. Limited views from the north and the west. And with this, we started to scribble a little bit further. Next, please. As I said, we received a program. I have given you in general form our organization for doing business. And this is in general the planning concept. Basic organization. It appeared to be a 3-headed monster, although it had 5 parts. Business, design, production. We did not want the cars coming along the lakefront, which meant that the public had to enter from the back. Therefore, some sort of a connecting link between the 3 balloons. In taking it one step further, we took our business area and broke it into its program requirements. A business manager office, an affiliated corporations office, an administration area for 3 secretaries, a conference or boardroom for the entire corporation. In the design area, secretarial pool, library and resource area, and the project management people, the project architects partners. In the production, drafting, secretarial assistance, specs and inspection, and a print room. And between these, reception and display. As long as you have a captive audience waiting to get into the inner sanctum to see you, you might as well use the walls to sell your product, which is what we decided to do. 2 entrances, a public entrance, a private entrance. The view was best in these areas, approximately this relation to the water, being as close as we could structurally. North is to the top. We finally then started to take the balloons and fill them in a little bit better. Very little change in the concept of the building, except in the design area and in production. When you try to make enough offices to put all the chiefs in there, you can't get everybody a view directly out over the lake, which means that some people have to look east toward the highway and some have to look west towards the setting sun. Prevailing wind is at this point here. The greatest area of solar beam is here and from the east, as far as its effect on somebody trying to work on a board. Finally, we came to an organization here which called for 10 offices located here, a secretarial pool in the center, and a library resource area behind it. We felt as long as we were facing north with that, we might as well put a clerestory across and get north light, natural light, into an interior room. When the decision was made to go east and west with some of the offices, and when the effect of sun bouncing off the lake was considered, we had certain solar problems at hand right away. It was therefore decided to go into glare-reducing glass. We actually made one step further, but we couldn't sell it to the more conservative members. We wanted to use mirror-faced glass on the outside, one-way vision glass, which would have reduced the solar gain and maintained privacy through the day. At night, when you wanted to advertise the building, having the brighter light on the inside would have changed the action and people could have looked in. But we couldn't get that sold. So we went to solar bronze, glare reducing. We had to plan landscape screening on the east and west. In the grafting area, we started to grow. We went for 15 grassmen to start with, and then it was decided that 25 is more attractive than 15, so we went to 25. This gave everybody so many Indians to play with or something. It was also decided that since we were going to be out in the Tweedleys at this time, there was no place where anybody could go eat without getting in their car, so we ought to provide a lounge where people could eat. So a lounge entered the program. It was also remembered at the right time that if we had put the print room where it's shown here, we wouldn't have been able to take advantage of the prevailing wind, and we would have probably blown the fumes from the machines back into our fresh air intake. So we decided to stick it up on the far corner to let it blow away. Somebody remembered storage. It was discovered that we had 128 tubes, about 5 inches in diameter and 40 inches long, containing up to 3 jobs each stuck in a room, as well as about 60 drawers full of correspondence. So we had to find a place for that. It's amazing what you can do when you go in your attic and find out what you have. Finally, you have the necessary toilets and restrooms, etc., which any good building should have, connected by a reception and a display area with the public entering from the north and the workers entering from the east, and we had programmed expansion off to the east. Now we had the beginning of a planned concept. How to frame it? What kind of an architectural statement? For some reason, we decided to go to a steel frame building. We then found that there were a great many problems as far as the scheduling of the steel was concerned and trying to meet our construction schedule. So we decided we would go instead to a ball bearing structure with steel joists. We then came up with the problem of how do we accomplish the fenestration in the building in a wall bearing structure. It was not felt that we wanted to punch holes in the walls. We wanted our fenestration to be grouped in large areas. We also had to have some overhang at the glass line to protect it. So we went to a wall-bearing masonry structure of brick, both faces, as indicated in black. The red lines indicating the approximate layout of the joist. Across the glass areas, as here, 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 etc., it was felt that we wanted to make a statement of the lintels that would be required to hold the whole thing up. We decided also that because we were set below the level of the road, that we ought to raise the building off the ground. We also were encouraged in this event by examining the 1913 flood level for the area and finding that we would have been 2 feet underwater had we not taken this course, in the event 1913 ever should return. Very doubtful, but safe. There was an advantage to raising the building up off the ground, about 3.5 or 4 feet. It not only presented a taller structure, giving some opportunity for shadows under the building, it gave us a place to run all of the mechanical units with access to them so that we could change them with the great regularity that we do as we change our method of doing business. Telephones, for instance. Once upon a time, not too long ago, we had 6 phones, and we ended up with 19 phones. Now we have 33 telephones, and we still have requests for more. The partitions would have to be arranged in such a way that they could be adjusted, and when you move the partition, obviously the mechanical system has to be adjusted to suit. What we did not want was a self-contained mechanical package on the building or under the building. So we decided we would make a separate building to hold the mechanical system. Also to hold a garage for the tractor that had now become a requirement because the acreage had grown to 6+ acres, and a boat to take care of those things that fall into lakes, including children and dead ducks and dead fish. Plus the seed and the fertilizer, which is immense for 6 acres. And a place for the poor fellow who was going to have to do all of this work, and a place for the plow for the tractor, and so on and so on and so on. So these are the 4 conceptual steps that were taken to get down the road. Every one of them fought with all of the vigor of the Iron Triangle in Vietnam. It was infighting for almost every step because we had 11 architects acting as a jury on this thing at every presentation. Architects are very nasty clients, very, very nasty. They have no shred of politeness where concept is concerned. Next slide, please. This is presented to you upside down so that you can maintain your frame of reference to the sketches. This is a human failing of all architects, that when you put a job in the back room to have it drawn in a presentation drawing, if you don't specifically say which is the front of the building, you get the idea for some unknown reason that a fellow wants to put the front door at the bottom of the sheet. This does seem logical. But really, the front of our building was on the lake. So I'm presenting it to you. You can see that some things have developed as the program has developed and as the appetite has gone up. We have the business and affiliated offices, business here affiliated. It then seemed that the people who were involved with public relations thought that they would like to have an office which had access to a lot of storage for brochures and plans and photographs, etc. So we decided to get these people, who, both of whom are architects, out of the way, since they are interested in public relations primarily, and stick them over there in business. A secretarial pool. It developed as the program was refined that if you have a business, you have business records. And if you have business records, you don't want everybody looking at them because it causes quite a fuss in the drafting room when the fellows find out the difference in pay scales. So you have to then have a place to lock them up. Of course, you have to have a place to hang coats for the ladies and so on. So this developed into an appendage on the building. The boardroom remained in its proper place, but it was decided if you're going to have a boardroom and you're going to use it for large client presentations, why, you have to maintain the inner soul of the client with coffee and other suitable refreshments according to the type and degree of success that you're having at that moment. If you are very successful, you will probably want to keep something to celebrate with. This is very bad to keep out of lock and key, so you have to have a place to lock all the goodies up, which developed here. It was then felt that it was a strenuous effort on the part of the people in this area to have to walk over here to use the facilities. They were walking further than that, but as you know, when you're planning, you always plan for the best. So we had to add a restroom on this sign to suit the short legs of the business manager. We now then developed our 10 office spaces. Each of the openings, as you will notice, has a 5-foot porch, in effect, in front of it, a projected slab. The foundation line falls back here. The overhang is out at this point. Each office was designed to give the project architect an opportunity to meet people in his own office. We had all come from a place where you had to go to the conference room to meet the client because you and the client couldn't get in the space that we had for offices. And it amounted in our older office of having so many conference rooms that we had to give up offices to support them. So we felt that we should design the offices as an office in a conference room. We provided the necessary comfort facilities in this area for the convenience of the project architect. For some reason, there was no complaint from this fellow who had to walk much further than the business manager, but did it willingly. We provided a shower. This was an added runner. It was decided if you're going out for an interview in the evening, you ought to be fresh. I agree. So if you want to be freshest of all, you go here first and then you take your shower. We then took our reference room. The term library had lost its significance because at that time we were working on the IU library, and this kind of paled in comparison. So we called it reference. This was because research and analysis had entered into it, and it was felt that a computer and its associated material should be involved in the room. We had a series of library racks set in here to handle about 4,500 volumes. About a third of them would be catalogs. You're plagued to death in the practice of architecture by catalogs from happy salesmen. I think that their success is rated on the number that they distribute. And when you have 12 partners or participants in there, you get 12 of everything, and it becomes a monstrous burden. So we decided we would keep one in here and throw the other 11 away. Samples are a very important part of the practice of architecture. If you approve something for the use on a building, you would do well to keep it for a while. You would also do well to keep some things to convince a client that the finish that you're talking about on a piece of wood or a type of brick that you want to use is really the thing. He will not understand it unless the living, breathing material is in his hand. We decided to consolidate our central files along with the computer work. We put in an electric vertical filing system, which was 10 feet high and about 5 feet wide, and was the equivalent of 13 standard file cases. And it looked exotic, too. In addition, we had a librarian file clerk. Before, we had maintained a series of individual filing systems. We now felt we would hire someone who would put all of this together into some joyful arrangement. We had reference tables here for those who wanted to refer to something and more conference space. A clear-story window up this wall with a roof pitching up. A very large reception and waiting area. We did a lot of research on this and found out that clients arriving strange at your building are more impressed with the size of your anteroom than almost anything else. If it's large, it's obvious that everything behind it is quite large. So we made it large to suit. It also gave us a lot of display space. We came along and organized our specifications office here with the typist immediately outside, a conference and plan takeoff area for the salesman who had to come in and take off a job which was due and who didn't want to pay the money to take out a set of plans, a plan rack for active jobs, an inspector's office, the facilities again, a lounge with a kitchenette area, a drafting room, print room, shop, dark room, story, post, and a side entry, expansion out to the side, public entrance to the front here. We felt that we were shortchanging the public in a way. We did not allow them to view the site once they had passed this point. The lake was gone. So to make them have something to feel more refreshed about, we put in a reflective pool with a couple of fountains in it, also figuring it would throw the north light up into the building. They would not see the lake again until they broke through at this point. This, then, with the lake, this area down here, was the final preliminary of this plan. May I have the next slide, please? These are some of the sketches that we made trying to come up with a concept for the construction of the building. Here you can see a steel frame going to be made of core tin or weathering steel, consisting of a long bent plate coming across columns, a lighting member carrying the projected floor slab, the foundation line 5 feet back, these columns hitting the ground in this form. As we changed from one intersection to another, we changed by putting stiffening plates, projecting and opening, attempting to make a sculptural line. We tried to tie the building together with the core tin by using an angle fascia around the top of the brick walls. This turned out to be quite complicated because if you go to weathering steel, it turns out that it weathers all over your brick. So you have to then put a temporary drip on for about a year to let it weather on the ground and not stain your brick. There are all kinds of little things you learn about this as you go along. The fenestration was floor-to-ceiling sliding doors, one per office, set off center, a large piece of solar bronze with it, Duranonic finished aluminum. Next, please. We had a rendering made. It looks much better in the flesh than it does here, but it is a requirement of a mortgager to see what the building can look like. We found out that most people who lend money can't read plans. So you have to present them with something that they can interpret, which was the function behind this. It's rather made more romantic than it turned out, and the weathering steel is much darker than it turned out, but essentially a projected series of frames, the projected roof for the clear story, raised off the ground, floating steps, and so on. Next, please. We then went into working drawings, and the changes kept coming. One of the things we felt about offices was that doors are a real nuisance in an office. They either swing in or swing out, and either way they're in somebody's way. And they tend to be narrow. So we took the same frame that we were using for our exterior sliding doors and surface mounted it on the wall inside with only a head and floor track. No jamb. This gave us then a 5-foot opening. We stopped the door from sliding all the way back to reduce the door to 3-foot 4-inch gross opening because some people wanted to have their name on the glass. And this gave them an opportunity to have their name where it could be read all the time because their name would then be against the wall. The things you have to plan for are amazing. We added some space in the concept of the building. The specifications was decided more were required, inspectors more were required, the print room got bigger. The plan got up to its ultimate size of 15,000 square feet. We decided to change the direction of the business manager's office because he felt he ought to look at the lake since he was handling all the money. Now, we did one thing that we've always tried on our clients without success. We decided we would furnish the building, select all of the materials and all of the colors at this stage. So that round 4 started with a layout of all of the furniture desired in the building. This meant the first big thing was everybody's office. Fight number one in that particular round, the architect got all the points on that one, was the offices were all going to be furnished the same, instead of everybody having their own particular. This was quite a problem with the one partner who was interested in historical preservation because he has a nice old desk that he likes and a nice old chair, and that we just didn't figure that was going to cut it because they're kind of rickety but nice. So we won the round that the furniture would be handled en masse. Each office would have a 6-foot by 3-foot conference table desk. By that I mean one that has legs without any closure on the front so you can scoot up to it on all sides. A back bar laid against each unit, which would contain wide, shallow drawers for plans, 2 file cabinet drawers, several miscellaneous units, a demountable drafting board with a drafting machine attached to it, and a wall unit which would have sliding doors, one side wood, the other side cork, so you could pin up to your heart's content and keep all your books and stuff out of sight. There would be one chair which would double as a drafting chair and a desk chair, and a couple of more thrown in for the company. We carried this all the way through. We got all kinds of drafting machines in the office, all kinds of drafting tables in the office. You'd be surprised how cooperative manufacturers are about sending in sample drafting tables when you're going to buy 25 of them. We had all types. We finally decided, by letting most of the people in the drafting room use them, that we would take a standard desk height unit with an adjustable top on it and a sidebar such as a secretary has. In the furnishings, we tried to stay in as few pieces as possible by changing color to give individuality, and by that alone. It was decided that the overall wall finish and the ceiling should be white. The inside of the building was going to be plastered. We decided that we had been trying to sell clients for a long time on carpet. And we decided we would carpet everything in our building, including the drafting room, less the toilet rooms, less the kitchen, less the reception area, with wool carpet. The reception area, we decided to put down a strip teak floor and use an island carpet in it. Right along with the contract documents, the room finish schedule was developed, including the color schedule, and all of the furniture was itemized and specified, so that when we received the bids on everything, including the furniture. I would have to say that this is one of the more shocking times. Usually when you work with a client, you can get away with that equipment. It comes at a later meeting. But boy, when you have to take it all in one lump, it really is something. But you do have a chance to get it going. We made a full-size mock-up using a conference room of each project architect's office. We let them go in and gripe to their heart's content about various parts and modified it to suit. So that when we were done, everybody had worked in the office with the actual furniture that was to be in there and had a chance to express his opinion. Next. Here was another study of the exterior of the building, showing the arrangement for projection of the lintel system, actually a square truss member, the tie around the top, the projected roof of the library, the lake level at this point, the scale of a person. We tried to keep the fenestration line as simple as possible by eliminating all horizontal members. Next, please. Elevations came out thus on the working drawings. Essentially a simple brick and lintel building. Next, please. The site plan we worked out to include the landscape, so we get a pricing on that too. The large are existing trees. It's an existing entryway. Our drive coming back to handle 56 cars for employees and about 8 for visitors. The building sitting here, a reflecting pool, walks, a few mounds built up by bringing in earth, to protect the straight-on views into the parking lot and to define various landscape forms. The maintenance and service building over here to tag the future expansion of the building. The pond, a 30-foot jet aerated fountain at that point, and 21 ducks. Next slide, please. All of this was completed in October last year, 1 year ago this time. At the same time, the bottom fell out of the mortgage market. If you weren't borrowing money, you may not have been aware of this, but all of a sudden, you couldn't borrow car fare except by paying 10, 11, or 12% interest on your money. Now, when you're thinking of borrowing $300,000 for 10 years, the idea of 10, 11, or 12% is enough to give anyone pause, and it gave us considerable pause. You may remember in one of the schematics that I showed you, it was decided that we would have to have a rented building in this corner of the site. So we reversed our field with all the adroitness of a Hanratty, and we started again. We decided we would build the rental building. We would occupy it ourselves. We would pay it off in 7 years or sooner and build the other building, hopefully by this time having all kinds of income. Next slide, please. Here is the rented building, which we are now renting. You have a different problem when you're going to lease a building in the future. For one thing, windows are an awful nuisance in a building which is to be rented, because you don't know where in the Sam Hill the fellow's going to put all the offices, and invariably they fall on the windows. We decided that we would only have 3 openings in the building. A front door, a back door, and one point to view the lake. We took basically all of the programs that we had. We inhaled substantially on our space. This is 8,000. It does not have the built-in expansion that the other one did. But we came along and we organized all of the partners around a reference and general office space, library, and secretaries of this, receptionist, conference, boardroom, office, business management, print room, toilets, inspectors and storage, specs, racking room. Site plan like this. Parking for, there are now 60 cars out there. Visitor parking in the front, the lake over here. We decided to raise the building on a podium to give it some opportunity of getting away from the landscape, to set it in among the existing trees without chopping any of them down, to design the building so that it was a steel, long-standing building. There is a girder line right across here with 1, 2, 3 columns in it. The rest of the space can be handled in any way. We had to make one concession about which we weren't very happy. The mechanical system. It was too far to go over to the temporary building and connect to this one. And also we found out that if you get into this kind of an operation, you then have to file with the Public Service Corporation, because you become a public utility if you start to handle more than one building located a certain distance apart. We obviously didn't want to become a public utility, so we put roof-mounted units on the top of the building in this area right here. Next slide, please. We made another rendering for a mortgage agency. A different technique. It was felt we'd change our luck. The mortgage agency went for it. We got the money. The interest rate by that time had dropped substantially. Money was available. We had to be out of our building in August of this year. Construction was started in the middle of April of this year. Careful planning, careful planning. The furniture for the other building was used in this building. We ordered our furniture, including the same number of drafting boards, the same number of chairs, the desks, the whole works, the walls were painted the same way, etc. Next slide, please. We even went so far, we thought, while we're at it, we might as well throw the hat away and go into the graphics business too, because a lot of us didn't like our little JA symbol. So we developed a rather tortured worm that spelled out JA. And it's very effective because we've not written a letter to anybody yet who hasn't said, what does that stand for? So you have certain fringe benefits in this hieroglyphic support. Here you can see the property, existing trees. The dozer is out here getting this area ready. You can see the filling station and some of the houses in the back, the houses we now own. This landscape screen is to go in here as soon as the first freeze hits. Next slide, please. And here is the building. The screen is now being closed in. When this photograph was taken, the back part of this baffle had not been installed, therefore the tooth. We have a podium which is terminated by a railroad tie. We have some weeping trees and a little bit of a front and a wide porch. Next, please. Having approximately this appearance, very limited fenestration, sitting in among the trees. We didn't lose a single tree. Next, please. The only other opening except for the employees is the one out of the conference room at this point. Next, please. As you come down 45th Street, you see it in here. We began to rebuild the bank of the lake behind a stone retaining wall. We went out and bought 12 more ducks to put in the water, and some helpful little kid killed 10 of them the first night with a BB gun. There are more things in urban planning than you ever realize, like little kids. Next slide, please. And this is the view from the conference room, the only place we can see the lake that we paid so much money for. There is a purpose behind this thing. We hope that when, as the architect, I hope that when the other clients sit in there and look out, they're going to realize they're missing a good view like this, and let's get the heck out of this building and get in the one we designed in the first place. Thank you very much.
If you had any questions, Mr. Meeker said that you were happy to answer them.
Maybe the question is, why go into architecture? Yes.
The original plan, that skyline, is that for north light to the library?
Yes. Mm-hmm. It had about 5 feet of vertical surface, the full width of the room, approximately 50 feet wide. Yes, sir.
You say you have 12 project architects, or 12 departments, so they're confirmed in plan for your new building. It has only nine offices in that design wing.
We had 10 offices in the design wing because of the 12, 2 went into other areas of the business. 1 went into inspection specification. Another one went into public relations. So we moved them out of the design area. This is a real hazard of trying to develop a plan with X number of offices. When I started with the firm, there were 4 associates. We've gotten up to as high as 13, and it's awfully hard to keep track of the offices. The way it's been resolved more often than not is that the fellows who hold the greatest bulk of the stock vote the heaviest to get the biggest offices, and the other fellows take what's left. This is really what it comes down to. It's like any other corporation. Your ownership somewhat determines your position. The only advantage I would say I had as the architect for this particular thing, after working with a miserable client, was that I picked the office I wanted, and if they didn't like it, it was too bad. You know, I got my name on my office, and I made a couple of good friends by getting their name on other good offices. I carried a few votes in a few meetings by the correct allocation of office space. Well, I wish you all good luck in the practice of architecture when you get to it. I'd have to say, after some experience in it, that one thing that will help you immensely is to learn how to run a business. Because an architect has to run his own business. Be prepared, whether you have your own practice or whether you are a part of a big practice, to figure out budgets, to allocate the money that you have to do the job efficiently so you can turn out worthwhile work. Be prepared that if you're in real trouble on a job and you can't make it on the fee, to convince the people who are in business with you that it's worthwhile going in the hole to get a good job. Be prepared to answer the questions of a startled Internal Revenue Service examiner who didn't know his words was architects, done this kind of stuff. It seems that in architecture there is a graph between the number of years and the amount of time you apply a pencil constructively to a piece of paper. When you start, you apply the pencil about 125% of the time, since you're so interested that you stay in the office at night working on your own time to get the job done. When you get a little further along and you have 4 jobs that you have to get done, you spend the whole night there, but you only put in 100% on each one of them, and you've dropped off this larger percentage. When you are then sent to face the client with the results of your all-night efforts, your production time is cut down again, because you then have to start talking on the telephone and writing letters to explain why you did what you did. When you get a little bit further and you are given the responsibility to get the project out in total, you spend even less time, maybe 25% of your time, applying pencil to paper constructively, because you have 3, 4, 5, or 6 other people who are applying their pencils 100% of the time or 120% of the time constructively to paper. And you are merely pushing paper from one side of your desk to the other. And when you reach the nadir of owning a large firm, you find that very, very little of your time is spent putting a pencil constructively to paper. Most of the pencil on the paper is signing your name to something, making notes to yourself not to forget to stop by and see an irate client, or to send flowers, or to be at a dedication, or to get the slides back from the printer, or to be home for your children's birthday party. So what you have to look forward to is a graph with a constantly rising line, the line rising from 100% pure joy of creation to almost zero pure joy of creation, but being able to accomplish your profession in its fullest. Because drawing the line on the paper is not what we are here for. We are here to produce meaningful structures to be occupied fruitfully by the client. Thank you.